Have you ever wondered why your greatest desires sometimes slip away just as you fall asleep, as though the night steals them from your grasp? What if I told you that the very moment before you drift into sleep holds the secret to shaping your entire tomorrow? Stay with me, because tonight you will discover the before sleep ritual that opens the door to the life you have longed for. I remember one night in my younger days, restless, burdened by thoughts of lack and uncertainty. Yet something remarkable happened when I discovered the quiet power of the night. As I lay still in bed, I began to imagine myself already living in the world I desired, already clothed in the feeling of its reality. That night I slipped into sleep with the sweetness of fulfillment, and within days the outer world began to bend and conform. That was the first time I truly understood that the sleep technique is not just a ritual. It is the doorway to creation itself. The moment before sleep is not an ordinary interval of rest. It is the most sacred gateway you will ever approach in this life. In that delicate borderland between wakefulness and slumber, the outer senses surrender their authority and the inner world takes dominion. The body lies quiet, the breath grows deep and slow, and the mind releases its tight grip upon the troubles of the day. It is here, in this silence, that creation itself becomes pliable. The world you inhabit tomorrow is born in the thoughts and feelings that you carry into sleep tonight. When the conscious mind softens and the critical faculty grows silent, the deeper aspect of yourself, the one that accepts impressions without question, stands open and receptive. In that instant, imagination no longer meets with resistance. Whatever image you impress upon yourself in that condition enters without obstruction and is taken as reality. This is why the time before sleep is a holy passage. It is not merely about drifting into dreams. It is the act of planting seeds in the most fertile soil of the soul. What is planted there must grow. Consider how often one falls asleep rehearsing the pains of the day, rehearsing conversations that cause discomfort, or imagining the difficulties of tomorrow. Without knowing it, this becomes the ritual most practiced, and by morning the seed has taken root. Circumstances align with those impressions, and life repeats itself like an echo. But if the same energy is directed toward a new vision, the entire course of destiny changes. It is not fate that shapes you, but the imaginal acts that you carry with you into that silent realm of night. The gateway of sleep is therefore not passive, it is active participation in the creative process. To enter it consciously is to stand at the threshold of the workshop where worlds are formed. The question is not whether creation occurs, for creation is always occurring. The question is whether you will direct it wisely. If you approach this moment with intention, you carry with you the power to recast the events of life, to shape tomorrow, and to alter the story of your own being. When the mind becomes still and images grow vivid, you are entering the laboratory of spirit. If you choose to see yourself as successful, loved, healthy, and secure, and if you remain with that image until it becomes a living feeling, then you have given the deeper self its command. That command does not question, it does not argue, it accepts and fulfills. This is the law at work in its purest form. You are never a beggar at the feet of life, waiting to be granted favor. You are the author, writing the script upon the pages of the unseen. Imagine for a moment the farmer who carries seeds into the field. He does not scatter them with carelessness, nor does he plant weeds in the soil he hopes to harvest. He selects the seed with purpose, he places it with intention, and he knows that the soil will do the rest. In the same way, the before-sleep state is the soil of your destiny. Plant with deliberation, for whatever is sound there will grow in your waking world. If bitterness is sound, bitterness will return. If joy is sound, joy will blossom. The soil does not discriminate, it only produces what is planted. So many believe that circumstances alone govern their lives, that the world of appearances dictates their future. Yet appearances are but the harvest of seeds sown long before. To change the harvest, you must change the seed. To change the events of tomorrow, you must attend to the imaginal acts of tonight. This is the essence of the gateway of sleep. It is the point where you choose what kind of seed will be planted in the field of your being. Do not mistake this for idle dreaming, for idle dreaming is without direction. This is not drifting into fantasy without feeling, but deliberately impressing the mind with the reality of what you desire to experience. Hold it until the sensation of it fills you, until you can taste its sweetness, until the image becomes more real than the outer world. Then let the body drift, let sleep claim you, and know that the work has been done. The deeper self will carry it forward into manifestation. The gateway of sleep is your opportunity to take possession of the creative process. It is your reminder that you are never at the mercy of chance. Night after night, you are offered the same gift. Each time you lie down to rest, you are invited to step into the inner workshop where life itself is shaped. The outer world may tell you that nothing has changed, but the inner world, once impressed, will always express. Trust the process, for it is as sure as the rising of the sun. What you take into sleep, you will find in the morning, whether in days, weeks, or months. The law is faithful, and the gateway of sleep is its chosen path. The state akin to sleep is the hidden doorway through which the mind passes from the conscious to the subconscious, where creation itself is shaped without resistance. It is a moment unlike any other, a threshold where the ordinary perceptions of the day dissolve and the imagination gains its true potency. In this quiet, suspended space, the critical mind is at rest, and the deeper self, which accepts without doubt, stands ready to receive the impressions impressed upon it. It is neither fully awake nor fully asleep. It is a fertile interval in which the seeds of reality are planted. To enter this state intentionally is to wield a power that is always present, yet rarely understood or applied. When the conscious mind relaxes and awareness softens, the imagination rises to the surface, not as a fleeting fantasy, but as a vivid and living reality. In this condition, one does not merely visualize an outcome, one lives it. The senses of the inner self are heightened, and the feeling of the desired experience is indistinguishable from the actual experience. This is the secret that those who understand life well have always employed, knowingly or unknowingly. The state akin to sleep allows the imagination to impress upon the subconscious with certainty, for in that quiet interval there is no resistance to dilute the conviction. It is essential to recognize that the state akin to sleep is not passive, nor is it a mere precursor to slumber. It is an active participation in creation, a deliberate positioning of the mind in alignment with that which is wished to be experienced. To enter this state without intention is to allow the mind to drift into random imaginings, which often produce outcomes entirely unconnected to the conscious desires of the day. But to enter it consciously, holding firmly to the reality of the wish fulfilled, is to send a command to the deeper self that cannot be ignored. The subconscious does not debate, it does not argue, it merely acts upon the impression given. Consider the mind as a theater. In the ordinary day, the imagination performs quietly in the background while attention is occupied with the practical affairs of life. In the state akin to sleep, the imagination becomes the leading actor, commanding the stage. Every image, every feeling, every subtle sensation is magnified. What is experienced in this state is accepted as fact by the subconscious, and from this acceptance, the world begins to rearrange itself to correspond to that inner reality. The body may lie at rest, the eyes closed, yet the creative faculty is fully awake, and the unseen machinery of manifestation begins its work. It is not enough, however, to simply enter this state. One must also understand the manner in which the mind is to be directed. The images held must be vivid, coherent, and imbued with the feeling of reality. If one visualizes a scene with doubt or distraction, the impression is weak, and the subconscious cannot act upon it with certainty. But if one enters the state akin to sleep, with unwavering attention and feeling, allowing the imagination to fully inhabit the scene as real, the impression becomes permanent and unshakable. This is why those who have mastered this method rarely fail to see the results of their inner work expressed in their outer circumstances. The state akin to sleep is also a place where time itself seems to lose its authority. In ordinary consciousness, events are measured by the ticking of the clock, by the sequence of cause and effect. In this interval, however, the mind is free to move beyond the constraints of linear time, to imagine the end as already accomplished, to assume the reality of the wish fulfilled regardless of present conditions. The subconscious, having no concept of time, receives the impression as immediate and inevitable. What is imagined with feeling in this state will find expression in the outer world, whether it manifests tomorrow, next week, or months hence. The process is inexorable, for the law that governs imagination is faithful. It is also critical to understand that the state akin to sleep must be entered with consistency. A single night of intention may produce a spark, but the repeated practice of entering this state, with deliberate imagery and feeling, establishes a rhythm of creation. The subconscious becomes conditioned to accept only that which is assumed to be true. It learns the language of the imagination and responds in kind. Each night's careful practice builds a foundation upon which life itself is constructed. The results may not be immediate in appearance, but they are guaranteed to manifest, for the deeper self cannot fail in its task. To utilize this state effectively, one must also abandon the concern of how the manifestation will appear. The conscious mind often desires to dictate the form, the time, and the circumstance. In the state akin to sleep, such details must be surrendered. The task is not to design the outer reality, but to impress upon the subconscious the reality of the desire. When this is done with feeling, with clarity, and with conviction, the world arranges itself according to that impression. This is the essence of the state akin to sleep. It is a bridge from imagination to reality, from inner assumption to outer manifestation. Finally, one must appreciate the sacredness of this interval. It is a gift offered nightly, a portal through which the mind may enter the creative realm at its most receptive. To enter it with purpose, to impress upon the subconscious the desired state, is to engage in the most powerful act of creation available to man. Each night presents the opportunity to shape life, to guide circumstances, and to experience the unfolding of dreams as if they were already present. The state akin to sleep is the hidden classroom of the spirit, the quiet laboratory where thought becomes reality, and where imagination, when rightly applied, writes the story of one's destiny. The act of imagination is the foundation upon which all creation rests, and its practice before sleep is the key to shaping reality with precision. It is not merely a casual thought or passing fancy, but a deliberate and living experience in which the mind enters fully into the state of the desired outcome. The imagination, when employed in this sacred interval, becomes the instrument through which the deeper self accepts and manifests the unseen as the seen. One must understand that the mind at this moment is not a passive observer, but a powerful co-creator, capable of translating thought into tangible experience. In the quiet of the night, as the body relaxes and the senses withdraw from the outer world, the imagination rises to its true position of authority. Here, it does not merely picture an image, it inhabits it. The scene must be detailed, rich with sensory experience, and alive with the feeling that accompanies its fulfillment. To imagine oneself wealthy, for example, is insufficient if it is only a visual representation. One must feel the abundance, hear the sounds associated with success, smell the atmosphere of prosperity, and sense the freedom and joy that accompanies such a state. The deeper self responds not to words or thoughts alone, but to the full embodiment of feeling. It is often said that the imagination is idle play, a whimsical indulgence, yet in reality, it is the most serious and powerful faculty a human possesses. To cultivate the imagination before sleep is to employ it as a precise instrument of creation. The images impressed upon the mind in this interval are carried forward into the subconscious without resistance, for the critical faculties are asleep, and the mind is free to accept them as reality. The imagination is, therefore, not a tool of distraction, but a deliberate method of commanding life itself. One must also understand the importance of consistency in this practice. A single night of intention may plant a seed, but it is the repeated exercise of imagination, night after night, that strengthens the impression upon the subconscious. Each evening, as one enters the sacred state before sleep, the mind becomes increasingly accustomed to accepting the assumed reality as actual. It is as though the subconscious learns the language of feeling, the rhythm of sensation, and responds faithfully to every instruction. Over time, this becomes the natural state, and life itself conforms to the images held with conviction. To use imagination effectively, one must also embrace the principle of living in the end. It is not enough to desire an outcome, or to picture it as a possibility. One must assume the reality of its fulfillment, holding the mind and the senses as though the wish has already been accomplished. The difference between wishing and assuming is subtle yet profound. Wishing implies lack and future longing, while assuming implies presence and certainty. When the imagination operates from this state of assumed reality, it impresses the subconscious with authority, and the outer world aligns accordingly. It is essential to avoid distraction during this process. The mind must be fully occupied with the desired state, leaving no space for doubt, fear, or hesitation. These intrusions dilute the potency of the impression and weaken the power of imagination. The deeper self does not act upon conflicting messages, it accepts the dominant impression as truth. Therefore, during the quiet interval before sleep, one must maintain unwavering attention on the desired outcome, allowing the imagination to breathe life into every detail of the scene. The imagination before sleep also serves as a corrective instrument. Events of the day, whether disappointing or painful, can be revised through careful mental reconstruction. By imagining the day as one wishes it had occurred, the mind is not indulging in fantasy, but actively reshaping perception and laying the groundwork for a future that conforms to desire. This process is not about denying reality, but about asserting control over it, recognizing that the inner world precedes the outer, and that the imagination is the channel through which this principle operates. Finally, one must understand the sacredness of this practice. Imagination before sleep is the gateway to mastery over life, the means by which dreams are translated into tangible experience. It requires patience, discipline, and faith in the unseen, for the results may not appear instantly in the outer world. Yet the law is infallible. Whatever is imagined with feeling in this sacred interval will inevitably manifest. Night after night, as the mind enters this state and inhabits the assumed reality, the outer world begins to reflect the inner vision. This is the profound power of the imagination, the living faculty that bridges thought and reality, desire and manifestation, intention and creation. Feeling is the secret that unlocks the power of imagination, for it is not thought alone that shapes reality, but thought imbued with the living experience of the senses. To imagine is to create, but to feel is to give the creation its breath, its substance, and its permanence. The mind can picture a scene, but if the heart does not accompany it, the impression is weak, and the deeper self, which responds to reality as it is felt, cannot act with full authority. The feeling must be real, palpable, and alive. Only then does the imagination become the instrument through which the unseen takes form in the outer world. Consider for a moment how often one rehearses desires without feeling, wishes without conviction. One may visualize wealth, success, or love, but if the excitement, joy, and satisfaction are absent, the subconscious cannot be persuaded. It is as though a command is issued in a foreign language, unheard and unheeded. Feeling is the language of creation, the medium through which thought passes from the conscious mind into the deeper self. Without feeling, imagination is like a seed thrown upon barren ground. It may exist, but it will not grow. The feeling must be sustained until it becomes dominant, until it occupies the mind entirely, and until it is accepted as fact by every part of the being. One must feel the experience of having already achieved the desire, sensing its reality in every fiber of existence. If the goal is abundance, the sensation of abundance must be present. If it is love, the warmth, attention, and joy of love must be fully realized internally. The deeper self responds not to wishes or prayers, but to the living reality of feeling. When this is applied before sleep, the effect is multiplied, for the conscious mind recedes, and the impression is planted directly in the fertile soil of the subconscious. This principle of feeling is also the key to overcoming doubt and resistance. The conscious mind, aware of the present circumstances, may question the possibility of fulfillment. Yet the deeper self, when impressed with feeling, does not consider the current state. It only knows what has been assumed to be true. By immersing oneself in the sensation of the desired experience, by living it fully in the imagination, one bypasses skepticism and opposition. The outer world, which mirrors the inner state, begins to yield to what has been deeply felt. It is not sufficient to merely imagine the desired state as an abstract concept. One must involve the senses, the emotions, and the inner conviction that it is already so. The heart must participate as actively as the mind. The imagery must be as vivid as life itself, enriched with the textures, colors, sounds, and movements that correspond to the desired reality. This completeness ensures that the subconscious receives a full impression, leaving no ambiguity about the nature of the command. Feeling converts imagination into a force of creation, and in the quiet interval before sleep, this force is at its peak potency. The feeling also serves as a corrective tool, transforming disappointment, fear, or lack into their opposite. If one has experienced a day of frustration or setback, the emotions attached to those experiences can be rewritten through feeling. By imagining the same circumstances as one wishes them to have been, and feeling the reality of that revision, the subconscious accepts the new interpretation. The outer world will then adjust, reflecting the inner experience rather than the earlier limitations. This demonstrates that feeling is not passive, but actively shapes reality, turning imagination into the most practical instrument of life. To apply feeling effectively, one must cultivate the discipline of attention. The mind is naturally restless, and without careful direction, it will wander into doubt, fear, or distraction. During the sacred interval before sleep, one must focus entirely on the desired state, holding the feeling until it becomes the dominant inner reality. It is this unwavering focus, combined with the fullness of feeling, that convinces the deeper self of the truth of the experience. The subconscious cannot resist an impression fully embraced by the imagination and alive with emotion. Finally, one must understand that feeling is timeless. It is not limited by the sequence of events or the present circumstances. It exists in a dimension beyond linear time, where the end is already accomplished and the reality of desire is present. By feeling the fulfillment now, before sleep, one impresses the subconscious with a certainty that transcends doubt, setting in motion the natural law that arranges events and circumstances to correspond with the assumed reality. The inner world, rich with sensation and conviction, becomes the blueprint from which the outer world inevitably unfolds. Feeling, therefore, is the essential power that animates imagination, converts thought into reality, and ensures that what is assumed in the inner world is faithfully expressed in the outer. When fully employed before sleep, it magnifies the creative capacity, transforming nightly practice into a potent instrument for shaping life according to desire. This is the secret that governs all successful manifestation. The living sensation of the wish fulfilled, held consistently and completely, becomes the undeniable truth to the deeper self, and life itself is compelled to obey. The nighttime ritual of assumption is the most powerful practice one can employ to influence reality, for it is during the hours before sleep that the mind is most receptive to the impressions it receives. The body lies still, the senses withdraw from the distractions of the day, and the conscious mind relaxes, leaving the deeper self free to act upon the images and feelings presented to it. In this sacred interval, every thought, every sensation, and every imagined scenario carries with it the force of creation. What is assumed with conviction becomes the blueprint from which life is shaped, and the nighttime ritual is the disciplined method by which this truth is applied with precision and authority. To engage in this ritual is not to indulge in mere fantasy or idle dreaming, but to assume the reality of the desired state with full attention and living feeling. It is a deliberate act of consciousness, an intentional movement of the mind toward that which one wishes to experience. The assumption must be vivid, detailed, and coherent, encompassing the senses, the emotions, and the inner conviction that what is imagined is already true. To assume wealth, for instance, is not merely to picture money or possessions, but to feel the security, the freedom, and the joy of abundance as though it were present in the moment. The deeper self, encountering this full expression of assumption, accepts it as fact and begins the work of manifestation without delay. Consistency in this ritual is essential, for the subconscious is influenced most strongly by repeated impressions. One night of careful practice may plant a seed, but it is the nightly discipline that nurtures it into a living reality. Each evening, as the body relaxes and the mind enters the sacred state before sleep, describe the manner in which manifestation occurs, but the deeper self requires only the impression of reality, not the method of its expression. By releasing concern for the how and maintaining the certainty of the what, one allows the unseen forces to arrange events, circumstances, and opportunities in alignment with the assumed state. This ritual also cultivates the sense of inner sovereignty. Each night, as the assumption is held with conviction, one comes to understand that reality is shaped not by external conditions, but by the inner state of consciousness. Life ceases to be a series of random events and becomes instead a faithful reflection of the assumptions embraced in the sacred interval before sleep. The power of the mind is not abstract or theoretical. It is practical, immediate, and measurable. Every night's practice reinforces the understanding that the individual is the architect of experience, the director of circumstances, and the author of destiny. To employ the nighttime ritual effectively, the images assumed must be alive with feeling. It is insufficient to picture outcomes as if they were distant or hypothetical. The scene must be inhabited fully with the emotional resonance and sensory detail of reality itself. The subconscious, which operates without question or doubt, cannot distinguish between that which is imagined with feeling and that which is physically experienced. By engaging the full capacity of the mind and heart, the ritual impresses a living reality upon the deeper self, compelling the outer world to respond accordingly. The discipline of repetition, the richness of feeling, and the clarity of imagination together constitute the potency of the nighttime ritual of assumption. Night after night, as this practice is faithfully observed, the subconscious learns the language of the desired state, and life begins to reflect the inner vision with precision. The unseen mechanism of creation, which operates silently and unfailingly, arranges circumstances, coincidences, and opportunities to correspond to the assumed reality. This is the ultimate power of the ritual, to turn the quiet moments before sleep into the laboratory of manifestation, where intention becomes form and imagination is realized in the waking world. The power of revision is one of the most transformative tools available to anyone seeking to shape their reality, for it allows the mind to correct, recreate, and redirect the course of experience. Every event, every conversation, every interaction carries with it a charge of energy that is recorded in the subconscious mind. Often these experiences are neutral, but when they are accompanied by disappointment, frustration, or regret, they leave impressions that shape future circumstances in accordance with the feeling they produce. The practice of revision teaches that the past is not fixed, that the inner interpretation of events governs the outer expression, and that by reimagining the day or specific experiences as one wishes they had occurred, one can transform the trajectory of life itself. To engage in revision is to take conscious control over the record of experience. It is not denial or avoidance of reality, but the conscious assertion of the desired state over what has been experienced. Each night, before sleep, one can review the events of the day and imagine them occurring in perfect alignment with desire, with every detail reordered to produce satisfaction, fulfillment, and joy. The mind must see these revised events vividly, with the same intensity and reality as if they had actually happened. When the revision is accompanied by the feeling of fulfillment, the subconscious accepts it without question and begins to rearrange circumstances to correspond to this corrected record. The power of this technique lies in its ability to neutralize the negative impressions that would otherwise accumulate over time. Without revision, disappointments, failures, and frustrations leave traces in the inner mind, subtly influencing decisions, perceptions, and expectations. These impressions can shape the outer world in accordance with limitation, fear, or lack. Revision, practiced consistently, erases these marks and replaces them with images of success, satisfaction, and achievement. The subconscious does not distinguish between actual events and those vividly imagined with feeling. It responds only to the dominant impression. Therefore, the conscious act of rewriting the day with intention becomes a direct influence upon the course of life. It is essential to approach revision with precision and clarity. The mind must not merely entertain vague ideas of improvement, but must construct the day exactly as it would have unfolded under ideal conditions. Every interaction, every circumstance, and every outcome should be imagined as harmonious with desire. The emotional component is equally critical. The scene must be imbued with the sensation of fulfillment, the sense of accomplishment, and the satisfaction that accompanies the perfect outcome. Without this feeling, the revision remains abstract and cannot impress the deeper self with authority. Revision also serves as a powerful preparatory tool for manifestation. By reshaping the record of the past, the mind sets a new pattern for the future. The inner world, cleansed of limitation and enriched with the desired state, directs circumstances to align with the new assumption. Life ceases to be a reflection of past disappointments and becomes a faithful expression of the inner vision. Events do not merely happen, they are orchestrated by the inner record, which has been deliberately rewritten to produce the results that are desired. This practice teaches an essential principle about reality. It is not the outward circumstances that govern experience, but the inner interpretation of them. Events may appear fixed in time, yet the meaning assigned to them and the feeling they evoke determines their influence upon future outcomes. By consciously revising the record of experience, one can eliminate the power of limitation and replace it with empowerment, mastery, and fulfillment. The mind learns to operate from the perspective of creative authority rather than passive reaction. The act of revision is also deeply liberating, for it releases one from the weight of regret, resentment, and self-reproach. To dwell on failures or missteps is to perpetuate their influence. To revise them is to reclaim control and redirect energy toward desired outcomes. This is not escapism, but active engagement with the principles that govern life. The subconscious mind, impressed with the corrected narrative, begins to attract, arrange, and orchestrate circumstances in accordance with the newly accepted reality. Furthermore, revision is enhanced when practiced regularly, night after night, as part of a disciplined before sleep ritual. The period immediately preceding slumber is when the mind is most receptive, the critical faculties are dormant, and the imagination can act with authority. By revisiting the day and consciously reconstructing it in alignment with desire, one establishes a consistent pattern of inner belief that translates inevitably into outer experience. The events of life begin to reflect the perfected inner record, demonstrating that reality is shaped not by circumstance, but by the interpretation and assumption that is impressed upon the deeper self. In essence, revision is a tool of mastery. It allows the mind to correct the past, shape the present, and direct the future. Each night, as the day is rewritten with clarity, precision, and feeling, the subconscious mind accepts the new version as absolute truth. Life responds, opportunities appear, and circumstances realign to conform with the assumed reality. The power to reshape experience rests not in wishful thinking, but in the deliberate, disciplined, and fully felt act of revision, applied consistently within the sacred interval before sleep. Daily consistency in the practice of assumption is the cornerstone of mastery over one's inner and outer life, for it is not occasional effort that produces transformation, but the faithful repetition of conscious acts that impress the subconscious mind with certainty. Each day, as the mind moves through its tasks and responsibilities, the patterns of thought and feeling create subtle impressions that shape the unfolding of experience. To cultivate a life aligned with desire, one must engage in a disciplined routine of assumption, returning each day to the conscious practice of imagining the desired state as already accomplished. It is through this daily attention that the inner self becomes conditioned to accept the imagined reality as absolute, and the outer world inevitably conforms. The significance and precision. Daily consistency also fosters a profound understanding of the creative power inherent in consciousness. When the practice becomes habitual, one recognizes that the outer world is not an independent force, but a reflection of the inner state. Circumstances, events, and experiences are governed by the impressions one carries within. To maintain this awareness requires daily engagement with the principle of assumption, for it is in the sustained practice that the mind learns to operate from a state of deliberate creation rather than passive reaction. The life of the individual thus becomes a faithful expression of the inner vision, shaped not by chance or circumstance in visualization, but an act of self-governance, establishing mastery over thought, feeling, and consciousness. Daily consistency also cultivates patience and faith in the process of creation. Results may not appear instantaneously in the outer world, Yet the repeated engagement with assumption builds an unshakable inner certainty. The subconscious, having been impressed again and again with the living reality of the desired state, works silently and faithfully to bring it into manifestation. The individual learns that the timing of events is irrelevant, for the inner state governs outer experience. Each day's practice reinforces this understanding, strengthening the alignment between imagination and reality and deepening the awareness that the creative power is ever present and responsive. It is important to recognize that the practice of daily assumption is not a mechanical repetition of images, but a living, conscious engagement with the desired state. Each session must be approached with freshness, intensity, and feeling, as though the experience is occurring in the moment. The imagination is most powerful when fully alive, when every sense participates, and when the emotions align with the desired reality. Habit without feeling diminishes the potency, but habit infused with conviction and sensory richness impresses the subconscious with absolute certainty, ensuring that the outer world mirrors the inner assumption with precision. The daily routine also reinforces the law of assumption itself. Life responds not to fleeting thoughts or casual desires, but to sustained, deliberate impressions that the subconscious accepts as fact. By practicing assumption each night, the individual establishes a rhythm of creation, a consistent pattern of inner reality that must inevitably express in the outer world. Opportunities, circumstances, and experiences align naturally with the inner state, reflecting the power of sustained thought and feeling. The more faithfully the practice is observed, the more reliable and immediate the results, demonstrating that daily consistency is the key to mastery over life. Finally, the daily practice of assumption becomes a sacred discipline, a method of engaging with the creative forces inherent within consciousness. It transforms the quiet moments before sleep into a laboratory of manifestation, where imagination is exercised with precision, feeling is applied with depth, and the subconscious is conditioned to bring forth the assumed reality. Over time, the repeated, intentional practice trains the mind to operate from a state of awareness, in which desire and reality are inseparably united, and life becomes a living demonstration of the power inherent in daily, consistent engagement with assumption. Through this disciplined attention, the individual discovers that mastery is not a distant goal, but the natural outcome of faithful practice, repeated without interruption, night after night. Awakening to manifestation is the natural consequence of the inner work done in the sacred moments before sleep, for the outer world is always a reflection of the inner state. Each night, as one impresses the subconscious with the reality of the desired experience, a transformation occurs that quietly but powerfully shapes the circumstances of life. The deeper self, which never sleeps and never hesitates, takes the living impressions of imagination and feeling and orchestrates the unseen forces of life to bring them into expression. Upon awakening, the individual is confronted not with distant possibility, but with the tangible unfolding of the reality that has been assumed, a proof that imagination, when fully engaged, governs the world. The process begins with the understanding that manifestation is not an abstract concept, nor is it governed by external conditions or time. The state assumed before sleep is accepted by the subconscious as present and actual, and the law of manifestation responds faithfully. This is why awakening is such a revealing experience. The outer circumstances begin to mirror the inner state, not always immediately, but inevitably. Opportunities appear, synchronicities align, and life begins to flow in accordance with the assumption held. The awakening is not merely physical, it is a conscious recognition that the world responds to thought and feeling, that reality is pliable, and that creation is an ongoing process that begins within. When the mind and heart are fully engaged in the state of the wish fulfilled, the subconscious acts as a bridge between imagination and reality. It does not question, it does not analyze, it simply organizes the unseen elements of life to correspond with the inner conviction. Each morning, the individual awakens to the proof of this principle, often in subtle but unmistakable ways. A change in circumstance, a new opportunity, a shift in perception, or the effortless appearance of the desired outcome. These manifestations are the direct result of the assumptions held the night before, and they demonstrate that the mind, when disciplined and focused, is the true agent of reality. Awakening to manifestation also serves as a reinforcement of belief and conviction. Each realized desire strengthens the understanding that imagination is not idle fantasy, but the foundation of all experience. The more frequently one engages in the nightly practice of assumption, the more immediate and tangible the manifestations become. The outer world becomes a mirror that faithfully reflects the inner reality, and the individual learns to trust the creative power inherent in thought and feeling. This trust eliminates doubt, hesitation, and fear, allowing the process of manifestation to operate with increasing fluidity and certainty. The awakening is not a single event, but a series of confirmations, each one building upon the last. Life begins to respond with greater speed and accuracy, presenting situations that align perfectly with the inner assumption. The individual notices coincidences that are far too precise to be accidental, opportunities that arrive exactly when needed, and circumstances that shift in perfect harmony with intention. These are not miracles in the random sense, but the inevitable outcomes of the subconscious acting upon the living impressions of imagination. Awakening thus becomes a daily affirmation of the principles of creation, a living testimony to the power of deliberate assumption. It is important to approach awakening with awareness, for the recognition of manifestation is as vital as the act of assumption itself. One must learn to observe the results, to acknowledge them fully, and to understand that they are the direct consequence of inner alignment. This conscious observation reinforces the impression upon the subconscious, ensuring that the patterns of manifestation continue and expand. The individual who awakens to the results of careful mental discipline develops a relationship with the creative forces, learning to anticipate and direct the unfolding of circumstances with clarity and intention. The process also teaches patience and persistence. While the subconscious always acts upon the impressions it receives, outer circumstances may take time to align fully. Manifestation is a natural unfolding, and the inner state must be maintained consistently. The awakening, therefore, is not merely the first hint of external change, but the beginning of a series of confirmations that life conforms to the inner vision. By maintaining faith, focus, and feeling, the individual ensures that the impressions given to the subconscious continue to mature, gradually revealing themselves in the physical world. Ultimately, awakening to manifestation is the living proof of the creative power within each individual. It demonstrates that life is not a sequence of random events, but a reflection of inner states. Each day begins with the recognition that the world responds to assumption, that imagination is the foundation of reality, and that the deeper self acts faithfully upon every living impression. The outer world, once experienced as a realm of limitation or unpredictability, beholds. The mind, when disciplined and directed, is not a passive observer but an active participant in creation, and the subconscious, faithful and unwavering, translates these inner impressions into the outer world. Night after night, as imagination, feeling, and deliberate assumption are applied with consistency, the life desired is not a distant hope but a living reality. Through the power of imagination, the depth of feeling, the practice of revision, and the disciplined nightly ritual of assumption, the individual learns to exercise mastery over experience. Limitations dissolve, past disappointments are transformed, and the unseen forces of life align to reflect the inner vision. Daily practice cultivates certainty, patience, and unwavering faith, while awakening each morning confirms the power of the inner state. The outer world becomes a mirror, reflecting the fulfillment of desires long imagined, deeply felt, and consciously assumed. Ultimately, the process demonstrates that creation is not a matter of chance, luck, or circumstance, but the natural result of deliberate inner work. The power to shape life lies within, in the sacred interval before sleep, where the imagination, guided by feeling and assumption, impresses the subconscious with reality itself. By embracing this truth, one steps into a life of mastery, where thought